How do you deal with somebody who's being prejudiced with you in that moment? Someone who refuses to acknowledge, despite you showing them a card to say, I have a hidden illness, they refuse to acknowledge it and say, you're just lying, you've just made that card up yourself. How would you approach that person and help them to understand?
I think that's really hard, and I think the reality is you often think of a good answer the next week, not at the time. That time, Varsha, you were telling me actually that often you often will try and share the information so other people listening to you will also hear it. If you're on a bus or something, explaining why people are giving up the seat. If people are challenging you, I think so often it depends on where they're coming from and why they're saying it. Because I think it depends a bit on the situation. And if I'm really honest, I think sometimes it depends on your energy levels, if you feel able to challenge them. But the reality is, you can remind them that MS is a long-term health condition which is recognised as a disability under the legislation, the Equality Act 2010, if that's appropriate. You know, if you are talking to a service provider and saying, and they're refusing to do something for you, say, well, actually, under the Equality Act, you have a legal duty to make an adjustment, and all I'm asking you to do is provide me with a seat after she speaks to their supervisor. I mean, the reality is sometimes you think, there's no point speaking to this person. After she speaks to their supervisor, if appropriate, then they often back down. Or you say, ask for their name. If you can't hear their name, or if you're on the phone with them, ask for their details. If you can't speak to their manager, ask their details so you can write a letter of complaint. And again, usually they start behaving because they don't want that letter of complaint. But I think it's really difficult to give. But also, I would say, feel confident in yourself. They're the ones being an idiot, not you. Don't try not to get upset about it. And if it happened and you aren't able to deal with it that well in that point in time, think about how you can deal with it for next time.
I find it's actually easier to take myself out of a situation than to continue to challenge someone who refuses to accept it. Like I said, I've been on a bus where somebody's refused to give up a seat for me, despite me showing them a card to say that I have a hidden illness and I do need to sit down. Sometimes the drivers are helpful, sometimes the drivers just want to stop the bus, people to get off and then move on, so they don't want to be understanding themselves, which is a bit of a shame. But if it's getting too stressful, it's too difficult to have a conversation with that person, I find it's easier to just ignore them, maybe even get off that bus and get onto another bus.
Yeah, I think sometimes life is too short to remain in a situation that is stressful and upsetting. So I do think you should make a strategic choice over whether you stay and confront them, or do you think, you know what, I'm going to remove myself from the situation and get on to the next one.
Yeah.
Because you've got to think about your energy level for the rest of the day.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've had conversations with people on the bus and made sure that my volume was just slightly high enough for the rest of the people on the bus to hear what my conversation. People tend to love to eavesdrop, but they don't want to speak to you directly to hear what you're experiencing. So if I'm having a conversation usually with somebody else who's disabled or elderly, they seem to be more understanding because they have their own challenges to deal with. I'll have a conversation with them about my abilities and what I can and can't do, and I find that other people are listening in because people behind you suddenly go quiet and are paying attention, even though they don't appear to be paying attention. So that is one way of, I guess, raising awareness of, you know, talking to the room without talking to the room.
I think that's really great that you do that, because you say you are raising awareness in your own way. Is that something you felt comfortable doing when you were first diagnosed?
No, when I was first diagnosed, I think like many people, I just ignored the fact that I did have a hidden illness. I just pretended that it did, you know, that I was fine, and you know, I'll just take it one day at a time and see what happens. Maybe, you know, there was a mistake and I can just get on with life. But as time has progressed, I've had to make adjustments and accept that, you know, things aren't going to improve if I carry on the life with the way I was. I have to learn to adapt, you know, and the more I adapt, the more I am able to do. So I find that if someone's being confrontational, they're not willing to give way. So it's easier to take myself out of that situation, because my stress and anxiety levels are more important than making someone who doesn't care understand. And you know, maybe next time round they'll experience it through someone they care about, and then it'll be different.
But it's really good that you're sharing your learning.
Yeah, I think it's important to stay positive. Just because you have a negative experience, you can't focus on that, because otherwise that's going to drag you down, and it's not going to help you to move forward within yourself.
I mean, the reality is, in some situations, you could still register a complaint. So you could remove yourself from a situation, but make a note of the bus number and say the bus driver's unhelpful, and still do a complaint. So you can do both. Keep your stress levels low, but still follow up. Because depending on the situation.
I have done that on one occasion actually, where I'd got onto the bus and asked the driver, would you mind waiting until I sit down, and he was rather rude and aggressive towards me. So I made a note and complained to the London Transport, and they were kind enough to write back to me to say that, look, we're going to retrain our staff to make sure that they are aware to be a bit more considerate of people with disabilities. So that was nice to get that feedback.
That is good. I actually know they have been doing they've done a big training programme called Hello London to train bus drivers, to give them that awareness.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think, you know, it just kind of reiterates the fact that it is up to people who experience these symptoms to come forward and say to people, you know, authorities, that this is what I'm experiencing and having trouble with, this is how you can help me. And only then will your experience improve. You know, unfortunately, we need to help them to understand, because otherwise they won't.
It's really, the other reason I'm a big fan of complaints, actually, in some ways, is that because I work with an organisation like Transport for London and Sainsbury's, I know that we use those complaints as evidence of a need for training, as evidence of a need for investment in making a change. If we don't have the evidence of need, we can't make change happen. So part of what people with MS need to do is provide the evidence. So we are able to do that. At the strategic side, go, actually, please can we invest X amount of money to do Y, because then it will help.
Yeah, because we are the experts.
Yeah, you
not
are.
the
and
people
you know
making
how
the
it
changes.
impacts on you, absolutely. And yeah.
Yeah, I also think it's important to, you know, if somebody does something right back, let them know that they're doing something right, because that also has a positive effect. It encourages organisations to do more, because they feel like, oh, we're doing something good and somebody's acknowledged it.
And it's true, you're absolutely right. I think it's quite rewarding, because sometimes people put a lot of effort into trying to get something right. They don't get any feedback, so they sort of think, oh, maybe there's no point in doing this. But there is a danger sometimes that people will try something, then think, well, nobody's giving us any feedback, so maybe we won't bother. So it is really worth giving positive as well as negative feedback. And as you say, it makes it for a virtuous circle.
Yeah, so it's really, really important in that case to make sure that you are giving feedback. It's not just a complaint, it's not just a compliment.
Yeah.
It's actually encouraging change.
And also, if you point out exactly what it was that made a difference. So if it was like, they actually spoke to me like a human being, whatever it is, or they gave me a seat, or they managed to do it in a nice way without upsetting everybody, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, if a bus driver's made an exceptional effort to help me out, I've had people drivers actually get off the bus to help me off the bus, which I thought was really nice.
Good.
And they work hard too. They need to be appreciated too, and it makes them, once they feel appreciated, it makes them want to do it again, because they are appreciated. I mean, so I do write and say, look, this particular bus driver on this bus, you know, helped me to this extent. I wish the rest of the drivers were able to do this too. So and they can incorporate it into their training and make sure that the other drivers are following. So, you know.
I think that's a really, really good example, because I know they do often track, and you're able to track the bus numbers. They will track who was the driver and give them the feedback.
Yeah.
It makes them feel good, because for some of them, they're taking the risk of upsetting the other passengers by taking more time to do that, then it's worth it. It's like, oh yeah, that's good. It made my day a bit better. Because if you're a bus driver, you get a lot of people shouting at you as well.
Well, it makes the other passengers on the bus think twice as well. And think,
Exactly.
actually, that was quite a nice bus driver to do that. Maybe I should have done that.
Precisely.
So it's leading by example, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good.